and he looked at me, and suddenly he burst into a big temper, and he stood up and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said haram, which means, it's forbidden. And he lifted his hand as though he was going to hit me, and I looked down at the floor waiting for the feeling of his hand hitting my head. Hello, this is Sally McNally.
And this is Bridget, Sally's daughter.
Welcome back to the Bleedin Truth. Bridget and I meet here for our podcast, and we're trying to focus on women's health around the world. This is a little forum to lift women up and draw attention to different subjects that maybe some people have not thought about, or some people think a lot about, but in ways that maybe we can all get together and improve things. So if you ever want to ask me a question, I'm a women's health nurse practitioner, and I'm a certified nurse midwife, and women's health is my jam.
And we're also going to definitely dive into a lot of Sally's crazy personal experiences while working in this field and being a part of labor rooms across, different countries. So we're going to hear some of those crazy stories, as well as, focusing on important issues of women's health. So for answering one of our questions today, somebody asked, this person is anonymous, so I'm not sure who or where they're from, but they're wondering, Sally, if you hadn't have become a midwife, what other career path would you have chosen?
Oh, I would have been a photographic journalist or a journalist.
Yeah.
I love watching journalists work on the TV. I'm a big CNN, MSNBC fan, and I love how they tell a story in real time, and I always respect the ones who go off to war and bring the stories back. So yeah, I think that would have been a storyteller, but like a journalist. That's what I would have been.
Didn't you make a documentary once?
About my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did.
Yeah, she made this really amazing documentary with the old big camera that you have to lift onto your shoulder, right?
Yes, yes.
And just, the editing of that time was really good. You did so good.
Thanks, Bridget.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so happy I got to make that little movie about my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's something really special now that they're not here anymore.
Yeah, so sweet. I could totally see you as a journalist too.
Yeah, I'd love to be.
Alrighty, so
Next
before
time.
we yeah, next life. Before we get into your stories for today, which are going to be probably a little bit heavier, we just want to advise listener discretion. If you're squeamish or anything, some of these stories can be disturbing. So just listen at your own discretion.
Okay, thanks so much, Bridget. Tonight I wanted to talk about female circumcision. And even just saying that, it's really hard to speak the word female circumcision. I teach this childbirth class, and when I start talking about the infants and what to expect, and their birth plan, and I say, are you going to circumcise your baby? And then in my mind I'm like, baby girl? Why would anybody circumcise a baby girl? Of course, circumcision for baby boys is widely accepted, but
Even that I don't understand.
yeah, well, yeah, that's another story, isn't it? But when I worked in Saudi Arabia, a lot of our patients were descendants from places like Sudan and Ethiopia. These people often brought their traditions with them. Sometimes they were taken over as slaves many years ago, but by the time I got to Saudi, they had integrated as part of the Saudi people. So some of our patients, we found that one of the traditions was female circumcision, and often we'd come across like women in obstructed labor, fully dilated, baby trying to crown to come
Oh.
out, but the tissues would be so thick or fibrosed or tight that the tissue wouldn't stretch to allow the baby to come out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's radical types of circumcision where they take the labia and of course, the clitoris and anything to do around the clitoral area is all gone, and then it's kind of stitched back sometimes into just like a little, basically a tight little whole area. So sometimes
Wow.
the
Oh, man,
tissue,
gosh.
I know, sorry, I'm sorry.
I knew this episode was
Yeah,
coming, and yeah,
yeah.
it's so hard to
I
think
know,
about.
but the thing is, like, we need to talk about these things
Hmm.
because they're still happening out there in the world. These tissues sometimes were so fibrous that they would cover over where the urethra is, where this
Mm.
lady's urine would come out. So sometimes the urine would come out and trickle down and have to come out through this little hole, but they would be more inclined to have urinary tract infections, and then sometimes they might need to have a catheter inserted for different reasons, to empty their bladder if they had an epidural, or to empty their bladder if we thought the bladder was too full and their baby wasn't coming down, different reasons. But sometimes it was really hard to find their urethra because of this fibrous scarred tissue. And that's just
Wow.
one tiny little problem that we would see. And then a couple of times the tissue was so tight and so hard for me to deliver the baby through. I had to do two episiotomies. Now, a lot of you women listening will know what the word episiotomy is, and it's something that rarely comes out of the mouth of a midwife. We pride ourselves in keeping the woman's perineum intact as much as possible. Sometimes we can't help it; the little tear will happen when the babies are being born. But to do the episiotomies, we tried that as a last resort to deliver the baby for different reasons. So, but with some of these radical female circumcisions, I would have to do an episiotomy one down and one up to
Mm.
allow the baby out. So that you can imagine
Yeah.
how awful that was. But then to make it even worse, once the baby's born, everything's, you think, wow, this is great. To do the repair, the women usually insisted, put it back the way it was, put it back the way it's so important for their circumcision to be repaired back the way it was, because they would be so afraid that their husband would want another wife if it didn't feel as good or the same.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. And of course, in some of these parts of the world, the men can have more than one wives, up to four, where I was. And often that was something that they immediately started to worry about. If you're the one fixing, please put it back the way it was. So then I did come across some women who had their vaginas were, very hard and uh, wouldn't stretch. And I saw a few women having to have cesarean sections because the baby couldn't move down and into the vagina like a normal birth happens. And the reason for this, there was a certain tribe or family line where they would take this, it's like a salt block, a little salt block that the camels would lick on, and the camels would then be able to retain water in their body because they had more salt. Uh,
Mm.
so of course some of the women, to get their vagina to go back after having a baby, please don't anybody do this at home, okay? It doesn't work. It's not the right thing at all. But they would
Mm.
take some of this and put it into their vagina, and that would kind of dehydrate the vagina in some way, and it would kind of shrivel and tighten up
Oh,
around
wow.
that after the delivery. So did see a number of women having to have cesarean sections because of that. So
Dang.
they'd have the circumcision and that. So that's just one little view.
So
Um,
was there like a real reason for having the female circumcisions done in the first place? Was it like an aesthetic?
It was to keep the women from straying. There's no other reason.
Wow.
There's no physical health benefit. I
No,
mean, the
definitely not.
American Academy of Pediatrics, they say, that there's some pointers to saying that there's a benefit to male circumcision. And then they say, but maybe there's not enough benefits to recommend that all baby boys are circumcised. So they kind of have this political answer that maybe you should, but it's up to you if you want to, and it kind of leave it up to the parents. But for the female circumcision, there is no obvious reason other than to maybe make in
Make it
man
uncomfortable.
perhaps, well, or more pleasurable for the man. Perhaps he thinks it makes it more pleasurable for him. But definitely it's about about control, ultimate control of the female, that she's belongs to someone, that she it doesn't have an urge to stray, and that
Wow.
she's basically like a sex slave. Now, if you are listening to me and you're circumcised, I apologize if this is making you feel bad, if you're being triggered in any way. I'm just telling you this is my truth. This is what I've seen. Part of my story with female circumcision, I saw two young brides at different times while I was over there, coming in on their wedding night. And so they were soaked in blood, different women at different times, but very, very young. One in particular stays in my mind to this day. And she must have been about 14 years old.
Oh my
And
God.
her beautiful wedding dress, all different colours, lovely. But the main colour that I could see as they were wheeling her in on the trolley, the gurney, was red with her own blood. So her handsome new groom had married her that day and then tried to have sex with her, but of course the circumcision that she had was too tight and he couldn't go in there. So he just grabbed a blade and just cut her off.
No.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah. And so that one in particular, she was like almost after bleeding out. Um, and when I saw the injury, we were all rushing to try and get blood for her and to get the doctors to help to bring her to the OR and help her. And I was mad, because I knew what it was, but I couldn't help myself but speak about it and ask, the groom who was standing there with his hands actually on his hips, looking at us. And I said, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And the translator was trying to come to me and she was giving me the look like, "Don't go there. Don't give him eye contact. Don't stand up like that." I knew what she was saying in her mind. And I was looking at him, I said, "How could this happen?" And he said, this is what happened. And he lifted up, like, kid you not, a razor blade,
Oh my
that you would put
God.
in the old style razors. And he looked at me like, "What's your problem? I couldn't have sex with my new wife, that was the problem." And he looked at me like he didn't understand what could be my reaction. Like, it was bad. Anyway, she lived, and we had to send her home with him. Yeah. So but that really struck me, that
That's just awful. It's
yeah.
just really, really
I'm
cool.
sorry, Bridget. I'm sorry to have to tell you this.
It's
And again,
okay.
I'm sorry if anybody ever hears this and you are one of those women. I apologize if this makes you feel anything negative at all. But I'm going to go on. I'm going to tell you the rest of my story. I remembered that man's look, that he was like flabbergasted that I should even question it. So I thought, well, maybe they just don't know that this is not the way things should be. So I I got permission from the head of the hospital, and this captain, to go out to the family tree where it was. Like, there was a Bedouin camp way out in the desert, um, and it was this particular family line, like they had the one name, and there was like thousands of them. But
Oh, wow.
so I got permission to go out to do health promotion, right? And to bring some books and, bring some flyers that we could make and, advise them on their health practices. And so I didn't tell them exactly what my plan was, but I wanted to go and talk about female circumcision, that it was wrong. So I got armed with my two armed guards and a translator and me and this little pickup truck. And off we went into the desert, and we drove for like 2 hours, I guess, to this area. Um, and when we got there, the translator explained that I was here with health promotion ideas. And I needed to speak to whoever was in charge. So there was this really big, ornate tent. Now, I felt like I was back in the 1500s. There was this beautiful big tent with like tassels, and there was camels off to the side, and there was a Mercedes right there with the boom box plugged into the battery, and it was like and then there was like, a little fire where they were making tea. And there was a hubbly bubbly. Hubbly bubbly is like something that they would smoke. And
Hubbly bubbly.
it was hot. I remember it being super hot, and I was there in my big long black cloak, the habaya, and my black scarf, and I was wearing a yashmak because this was, pretty dangerous place where I was going. Yashmak is like a little covering on your face, so you just look out over see just your eyes basically. So I went in, and the guy, so he would be the father figure of this Bedouin tribe. He was sitting there, and I came up and I knelt down in front of him, and the girls, the translator said, okay, tell him what you want and I'll translate it. So I immediately opened my anatomy book to to female anatomy, right? To
Wow,
the
you got right to the
uh,
point.
I did. I knew I wouldn't have much time, and I wanted
Wow.
to like make it. There was a few people standing at the entrance, and the room was like full of men. Or the tent. There was like maybe 12 other men sitting there. So I started pointing to the picture, saying that this was normal anatomy. And first of all, the translator kind of stuttered a little bit. And then I looked at her, I said, tell him, this is so important. You've got to tell him. And she said in Arabic, that this is what the female anatomy should look like. And he looked at the book, and he looked at me, and I pulled down my yashmak and I pointed at it, and I said, and this is a part of her body that should be left intact. And I looked at the translator and I said, tell him, it's so important. And she was looking a little scared, and she said it to him, and he kind of stood up, and then he sat down and he didn't know what to say. And I said, I'm here to tell you that some of the women that we see from your family come very damaged, that somebody is destroying this part of their body. And I want you, the leader, to teach the women that this area of their body should be left alone. And I looked at the translator and I was like, do it, girl, do it, help me here. And she
Wow.
did it. She said it to him, and he looked at the picture, and he looked at me, and suddenly he burst into a big temper, and he stood up and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said haram, which means, it's forbidden. And he lifted his hand as though he was going to hit me. And I looked down at the floor, waiting for the feeling of his hand hitting my head, but it didn't come. And then he just started shouting, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" And so the soldiers were like, "We're going now. Let's go. Everyone go." And
Oh, wow.
I gathered up my things, and I got up, and I was like feeling kind of hot with the temper, but also like kind of happy that I said my piece. And I was thinking, I should have done it a different way. I should have done it the soft way of leading into it rather than going straight for the jugular, you know. But that I was a bit passionate at those days. But then I turned and I came to come out and I saw the soldiers going out the gate or out the door. And then I saw the translator and then it was my turn. And there was two women standing right there beside me. And instead of going right out, I stopped and I looked at them and they looked at me. And we knew, I knew and they knew the truth. They heard it. They heard it. I knew it that they heard it. And we both, three of us looked at each other and it was like a telepathic communication. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, somebody heard. And I went off back home. And of course, I got chastised that I did the wrong thing, and it was meant to be about like eating the right food, and all, but whatever. I, to this day, I can remember that feeling of the women at the doorway of the
Wow.
tent that maybe they, you know, didn't circumcise their baby. Maybe, who knows? But
They might not have gotten a choice.
yeah. But again, if you're somebody who's circumcised, by the rare chance that somebody might listen to this who's been injured in this way, I am sorry that somebody did this to you. I am sorry. I wasn't there to help you. I'm sorry that no one saved you from having that happen to you. And if you yourself, if you can look around and see if you can save some little girl, do it. Take the chance. Do it. You know, this is 2022. Women don't have to live like this anymore. We need to look around us, see where we can help. There's a lot we can do. Thanks for listening to The Bleedin' Truth. This is The Bleedin' Truth.
This is Sally's Bleedin' Truth. Wow.
Sorry, it's a bit heavy.
It's okay. I think it's really powerful that, you know, you were brave enough to go and speak like that in such a dangerous situation. And,
Reggie.
you know, that was nearly 30 years ago and you still want to talk about it and share this and shine a light on the fact that it's still occurring in certain parts of the world.
Yeah. Like, you know, only women bleed. We have enough going on with the way our body has to bleed every month. But, you know, maybe that doesn't have to happen. You know, maybe there's another way women can live, that they can live free and they can enjoy their bodies and feel the joy of being turned on or the joy of being attracted to somebody and having your body tell you, you know, that that it's not a bad thing, you know. I'm sure it was all about total and utter control. Could have been nothing else. Anyway, that's
Wow.
thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so much about that. I know it might be hard for you to also relive some of it and, you know, have to think about those, you know, hard situations that you dealt with as well. Because even just seeing it happen to other people can really probably take a toll as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing yet again once another amazing, you know, snippet of your life.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
listening to me. Thanks a
Yeah.
million.
Thanks a million. And please share this podcast with anybody else that you think, you know, could find some benefit of some of Sally's stories or would like to get some advice. You can always ask Sally questions. We have a question forum in the description below, and we will answer those live on the podcast. And yeah, we will see you in the next one. Please like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for all the support for
Thank
Sally.
you so much. Thank you for
Yeah.
you guys who've already subscribed. We really appreciate it.
Yes, you guys are the heroes.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks a million.